talk to Spencer Feldman again this hour about human relationships, male and female. I suppose these generalities might apply to other types of human relationships, not the traditional. But there are some very interesting things in parts 1 and parts 2. We're going to talk tonight about some even more interesting aspects of why relationships fail and how to make them work under the normally, traditionally, hormonally, and culturally duress that relationships try to function under. Welcome back, Spencer. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for having me again.
Good. Nice audio. Clean tonight. Very good.
Oh, good.
Okay. Computers. We got AI. We got computers. We have a lot of different things to talk about. I'll let you lead the way.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But let's kind of recap a little bit about the first two things we talked about.
Sure.
In our first conversation, we talked about oxytocin. That's the hormone of love and bonding, and that's what we are going to have to keep at high levels in ourselves and in our partners if we want to get to happily ever after. Oxytocin is what makes us the most virtuous versions of ourselves. And in the second conversation we had, we talked about the idea of kingship, which is my word for an evolved man, right? A healthy masculine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that is about recognizing and declining the invitations for submission that other people, usually subconsciously, give as pecking orders in social groups form.
Oh, do they ever? Yes.
Yeah. So in relationships with other people, we need the kindness of oxytocin, but we'd also need some kingship. We need to be able to hold our ground. So in this talk, I'd like to discuss the balance of these two, being nice, but also being strong.
Mm-hmm. Now, Good trick if you can do it, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, people will typically get good at one or the other.
Yeah, I can see both. That. Sure.
Yeah, we need both, and I'll get into why that's the case. And to do this, let's go back in time to 1980. And there's a tournament organized by a political scientist, a PhD at the University of Michigan, mm-hmm. Professor Robert Axelrod. And what he did is he created a simple two-player game where in any round, players could choose to either be cooperative, we'll say nice, or competitive, we'll say selfish. Now, each player would make their decision to be nice or selfish before the round started, and then both decisions would be revealed. Now, there are three possible outcomes between the two players. If both players were nice, then both gained some points. They were both awarded a certain number of points. If one player was nice, but the other player was selfish, then the selfish player got a lot of points, and the nice one nothing. So there's a reward in this game to being selfish, like there is in real life, right?
Yeah.
Finally, if both players are selfish, neither get any points. And some people who might have studied game theory will recognize this is a version of the prisoner's dilemma. Now, after all the players played each other several times, the points were all tallied, and a winner was announced. But here's what made this interesting. Jeff, this wasn't people playing against people, but computer programs playing against computer programs. Some programmers programmed their computers to always be cooperative and nice. Some programmed them to always be competitive or selfish.
Uh-huh.
Some had programs that were usually nice, but then tried every once in a while to be selfish and get a little extra edge. And then finally, some programs had algorithms that learned and adapted to their opponent's strategies.
Ah.
Which program do you think won the tournament?
Yeah, I'm amazed this happened. What year was this again?
This was 1980, Jeff.
That's at the beginning of the computer age, and that's very smart programming. Go ahead and tell us who won. I'll guess. I usually guess wrong.
All right. So
I would have to guess.
Nice.
I would have to go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, we have the always nice.
Yeah.
They're always selfish. They're usually nice, but occasionally selfish, and the learning are adaptive. And, this can happen with people too, right? People can be nice or selfish or cheat every once in a while, or they can learn. If a computer program was always nice, and it played another program that was always nice, it did well enough. But when it played against a selfish program, it always lost.
So, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice
always
guys finish last,
nice.
Remember? That's where that came from, I think.
Yeah. So always being nice was not a winning program. On the other hand, if the computer was always selfish, it would only win when it played with programs that were always nice.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And this is where you see these abusive relationships. The mean people with the nice people, they get stuck together sometimes. Because the mean people know they need a really nice person in order for them to keep being mean.
To get away with their crap. That's right.
Yeah.
To get away with their mean, careless, cold, calculating, manipulating, demanding, temper tantrum meanness requires them to only be with someone who is virtually kind all the time. I get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we want to raise oxytocin, yeah. But that's where the kingship comes in. It's the recognition that there are predators in the world. There are psychopaths. There's only maybe a couple of % of them. But very few people are completely virtuous. And so you have to have some kind of strategy for dealing with people that aren't always nice, that aren't always virtuous. All right, what other things?
You have to, excuse me, you have to be able to, and you already know this, of course, one has to be able to recognize a dangerous person, because in many, many cases, that dark person will envelop his or herself with a kind, ideal exterior to bait and trick and draw in. It's just predatory. They're fakes. And it's a very common thing today, and it's very sophisticated. You know the old expression also, you really have to marry someone before you get to know them. How's that?
Right. So we talked about that, about how when you first meet someone, the first 6 months is infatuation and phenylethylamine. You don't get to see their dark side, their less evolved side, until the oxytocin runs out.
That's
and,
right.
If you don't want to bring that side out in someone, you want to keep them in oxytocin. Okay, so we've got the nice programs get taken advantage of. The always selfish programs, they only win when they play with always nice programs. But when they play with programs that are also always selfish, they lose, neither get any points. And if they play against programs that can learn and adapt, they also don't fare well. So, always being selfish is also not a winning program. Programs that were usually nice, but occasionally selfish, to try to cheat a little edge, they did a little bit better, but not enough. The program that won the tournament, hands down, was an adaptive program that had 5 very simple rules. So I'm going to give you the rules. Rule number 1, start with being nice. Rule number 2, if your other player is nice back, keep it being nice. Rule number 3, if the other player is selfish, be selfish back in the next round. Give us a little feedback, yeah? Rule number 4, if a selfish player becomes nice, be nice again. And rule number 5, if both players are selfish for 3 rounds in a row, be nice in the 4th round. Now, what do these rules accomplish? If the other players are nice, then you're nice, and you keep being nice together. It's a nice relationship. Everybody gets points. Great. If, on the other hand, the other player is selfish, it's going to have that selfishness reflected back. And in this way, the selfish program, if it is capable of learning, will learn to be nice.
Got it.
Finally, to avoid downward spirals where both programs are being selfish back and forth, the winning program had the ability to forgive and start fresh. It could hold out an olive branch and be nice again.
That takes courage.
Mm-hmm.
To forgive a sociopathically oriented, constantly demanding, taking, selfish person, it requires a great deal of maturity and courage. Because you think somehow that's going to mitigate that negativity you're dealing with all the time. And it doesn't always work. In fact, I would submit that it probably rarely works. People are creatures of habit, almost cradle to grave. They just don't change very often. That's a hard one. That's too bad, but that's my observation. Go ahead, please.
Well, what you notice is they forgive, but only at a certain ratio. They're not going to forgive every time. They're not going to be always nice.
Right.
But they're not going to be so stuck in this reciprocal tit for tat that they can't step out of it. So they're forgiving, but not every time. And what I realized when I came across this study, this tournament, was that the same rules that work for the winning computer can work in personal relationships as well. And what I did is I took the 5 rules and I turned them into what I consider 7 personality traits. So I'd like to go through what I think those are, the traits that we can have that will give us those will make us act as if we are following those 5 rules.
Okay.
All right. Now, the first one is be cooperative. Everybody knows that one. And you could say that that's the equivalent of being nice first, right?
Sure.
Then there's compersion. Then there's compersionate, and that's a word that not everybody knows. So
I don't know that word. I know a lot of words. I don't know that one. Spell it.
Compersionate.
Like compassionate, but compersionate.
Right. It's very close to compassionate. Compassionate means you feel another's pain. Mm-hmm. Compersionate means you feel another's happiness.
Okay. Good word.
So if you have compersion for another person, then when they're happy, you're happy. You're not envious. You're totally jazzed that they're having a good time.
Yeah, that reinforces their happiness too, of course.
Exactly. Compromises a person keeping your word, being compassionate, being forgiving, and being provocable. And I think the best way to see these words in action is to imagine that a couple is going out for dinner. So they're deciding where they want to go. Jeff, you want to go to Italian food, and your partner wants French tonight. So you say, well, how about we do French tonight, and we do Italian next week? All right? You're being cooperative, the first virtue. This is the equivalent of rule number 1, being nice first in the computer tournament. Sure, we'll go to your restaurant first. That's fine. The second trait is being compersionate. This means that even though you're eating French food and it's not necessarily your favorite, seeing your partner having her favorite meal makes you happy. It's still a win for you. The magic of compersion is it turns things into a one-player game. Your partner's win is your win. It's not zero-sum. The third trait is compromises. Now, in this situation, you might both agree to go to Indian food. Not the first choice for either of you, but a good compromise. Hey, I like Indian, you like Indian, we'll do that.
So they compromise and go to Taco Bell, huh? All right.
Sure. The fourth strategy would be keeps your word. And it's pretty self-explanatory. It means you're honorable. What it means, Jeff, is when you say, hey, we'll go to French tonight, and your partner says, great, we'll do Italian next week. You do Italian next week. If she doesn't do that, she's not keeping her word, there's an issue. Now, if you and your partner have these 4 virtuous traits, the first 4, right, that is cooperative, compersionate, compromises, and honest, keeps your word. If you have these 4 virtuous traits, it's all you need. You're going to play good games together. But Well, Jeff, we're not perfect people, and we can act selfishly sometimes, and there's miscommunication. So we're going to need 2 more virtues. Number 5 is compassionate. You don't want to see your partner suffer, so it makes it less likely to get into a tit-for-tat cycle.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Number 6, forgiving. This is how you stop a tit-for-tat cycle once it's started. Hey, you know what? It bothered me that we didn't go to Italian, but I forgive you. Okay, let's move on. It's the olive branch. It's that rule that says in the computer tournament, try being nice again, offer an olive branch. And what you'll notice, Jeff, is that of the 7 traits or strategies needed to play good games, 6 of them are virtues. This is one reason why we want to keep oxytocin high in ourselves and in our partners, because if we have a high amount of oxytocin, we're naturally going to have these 6 virtues. If we have high levels of cortisol, well, then we're not going to be our virtuous self. I almost think of cortisol and oxytocin as the angel and devil on each shoulder.
That's a good way to look at it.
There's one, yeah. But there's one trait left we haven't gotten to, number 7. Right. And that last trait is being provocable, right? This is where you say to your partner, you know, you've been selfish, and this is the consequence. You didn't keep your word. We did your restaurant last week, and now it's my turn, but you're not holding up your side of the deal. I'm going out with friends for dinner tonight. I'll see you later, right? You're not being mean. Being provocable doesn't mean attacking. It simply means you're going to withdraw some of your cooperation, and you're going to get your own needs met. This is where the kingship part comes in. Declining a beta invitation and calling someone out on their lack of impeccability, and then taking care of your own needs. Again, it doesn't mean you get angry. It just means you withdraw your cooperation and get your own needs met.
Or you hold your partner down and inject her with oxytocin and wait 10 minutes, and then...
Well, sure. You could think to yourself, wow, okay, is my partner tired or hungry or stressed? Do they just need a little space, and then they're going to come back and apologize for not being, you know, a good person, you know, as good a partner as they could be? So you can see these 7 traits are mirroring the winning computer program's strategy. So what I'm posing is that these rules, that these strategies, they work on small and large scales. We need to do this not just with our partners, right? You could almost call this the next step up in social play, right? We talked in our last talk about how part of the development of a child is you got to get down there and wrestle with them and roll around on the ground and let them get on top, and then you get on top of it. Nobody hurts each other, right? This is a version of that. You have to be comfortable being nice, but also showing a little bit of a little strength when someone isn't treating you in an impeccable manner.
All right. All logical, all pragmatic. If you can follow those rules, you're going to do much. Even if you can follow part of them, you're going to come out ahead.
What I think is useful, and what I found useful, Jeff, is kind of sit down with your partner and ask them and say, hey, you know what? Of these 6 virtues, of these 7 traits, which ones do you think I'm lacking in? And let me tell you which ones I think you could do some work on. And, you know, and your partner might say, wow, well, you know what? You really hold a grudge. You know, you don't forgive. We get in a problem, and you just hang on to it forever. You don't put out olive leaves, or you might turn around and say, you know what? You don't compromise. You know, it's always got to be your way or nothing at all. And this is a way to kind of look at and how healthy psychologically your relationship is. Find out and ask your partner, which of these 7 have I got? Which do I need to work on? It's a really powerful conversation to have with your partner. So these rules, they work on large and small and large scales, right? We have them with our romantic partners. We have them with our children. We have them in the workplace. We also have them with corporations and even governments, right? We have not used these rules in our relationships with corporations and governments, and as a result, they haven't treated us really well. I would say that, in effect, we are in abusive relationships with corporations and governments. They're abusive, and it's going to continue until we change our strategies. And in the act of changing our strategies, we train them to be more virtuous. You know, could you imagine a virtuous corporation and a virtuous government? It almost seems like an oxymoron, Jeff.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, all right, so people want to go back and reread and consider what you're saying. These are strategies for getting along in life, really in almost every situation where you are coming up against something that is intelligent or reasonably different, that you're going to have to learn to read them and adapt somehow. These are technologies to live by and problem solving. Very good. When we come back, we'll tell you how to get hold of Spencer's books on these, and stay tuned. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. Okay, and we're back with Spencer Feldman, talking about the dilemma of the human relationship. Any interaction between hominids, humans, is fraught with all kinds of trickery, learned gamesmanship, treachery, predatory types. You don't find that many people who really do give all the time, but people who give all the time, as you pointed out, are setting themselves up. It's not a winning strategy. It ought to be, ideally speaking, kindness should change the world. It doesn't. It doesn't work that way.
So let me reiterate these 7 traits, because I actually don't have this game theory part in the books that are available for free on our website. I streamlined them out, but I'm adding it now with you here because I think it's important information.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's cooperative, right? So cooperative, compassionate, that means another person's happiness makes you happy. Compromises, keeps word, compassionate, forgiving, and provocable. Now, at the bottom of the hour, I was broadening the relationships we have with our partners to the relationships we have with corporations and with governments, and how we are in abusive relationships with them.
You bet.
But even predatory corporations and governments are not the greatest challenge we're going to face this century, Jeff. We have a much bigger challenge on the horizon, and it's going to take all of our skill to deal with it, and that is artificial intelligence, or AI. AI does not mean artificial consciousness or artificial empathy. It means artificial intelligence. It means being able to learn and adapt. And according to the people who are actively working on AI, the singularity may be less than a decade away.
Less than like 2025, whatever. It's coming fast.
Yeah.
They are working on it around the clock. We know that.
Now, Jeff, singularity has a lot of definitions. One of them is the point at which self-directed evolution of a computer system becomes exponential in what has been called an explosion of intelligence.
Right.
AI will be orders of magnitude more intelligent than we are or ever could be. But it won't have a soul, Jeff.
Right.
No compassion.
Right.
Unless we teach it, it's going to have none of these virtues that we listed that are required for good games, for good relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Another name for intelligence and power without compassion is psychopathy. So one question we have to address is, how are we going to deal with AI? Early forms of AI have already learned how to lie and how to manipulate. This puts AI at the age of about a 3-year-old human child. That's when we first learn to lie and to deceive and manipulate. You see little kids, and they think somebody's watching, they'll cry, and then if they realize no one's watching, they'll
little
stop
con
crying.
artists. Yeah, I think they learn it even sooner than that, I think, now.
Yeah. All right. So if AI is about 3 years old in terms of human capacity now,
right,
its adolescence may be a very challenging time for the human race.
right.
A teenager might get drunk and total the family car. What might a teenage AI do, Jeff? We are, as a species, in the process of co-parenting AI.
You know, that brings to mind very quickly, this I think is relevant, a story I saw a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month. Forgotten the university, it's always seemingly a university, but they were working on trying to program into AI. And this isn't compassion, common sense. Now, that immediately brings up the question, whose common sense, whose vision and interpretation and definition of common sense are we talking about? That can be almost anything. It's a wide open subject. But they're to that point now where they're trying to teach common sense reasoning to AI programs. So they don't have to have an AI with a set response for every of millions of different circumstances. They can teach it to reason and to use rationalization. That's kind of even scarier.
Jeff, we are, as a species, in the process now of co-parenting rudimentary AI programs. And it's up to us to determine whether this is going to be a gifted and compassionate child or something else. At the moment, AI is being raised as a psychopath.
Thank you.
In the development of any person. In the development of any personality, Jeff, there's nature and nurture. I know that I believe I raised my 2 boys about the same, but they came out differently, right? So both what you come into the world with as well as the world itself play a role in what kind of person you're going to be. Now, we are going to need the architects of AI to create an AI whose nature is symbiotic, who is compassionate.
Yeah, but if these architects are psychopaths, Spencer, and I think many of them are, they're godlike in their approach to this. I've read a lot about this. That's kind of a scary thing. If they were normal, rational beings, which understood the 7 steps you just laid out, for example, on how to deal with conflict, yeah, we might have a chance. But whose common sense is it? And where do they go next? You're correct. I'm in total agreement with what you're saying. We're co-parenting a psychopath that is stepping forward rapidly to rule the world.
Yeah. We need the architects of AI to create a nature, to write the program so that the nature is symbiotic, but we can't rely on them doing that. I'm hoping that if they're hearing this conversation, it might be sparking some, a thought process along these lines. But we as a species also have to take responsibility for our behavior and how we are interacting with and teaching and educating AI.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nurture side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jeff, we are not going to be able to deal with AI like we have with, say, infections, right? Antibiotics worked for 100 years, but we're on the verge of mass antibiotic resistance.
Yeah.
If you look at the papers of the World Health Organization, you'll see that a lot of drugs are just not working, and we're poised at being right back at 1910.
That's right.
Where and part of this, Jeff, is because of our model of dealing with them is a competitive model. Without a cooperative side, our strategy is incomplete. We need to work on applying evolutionary pressures to bacteria to evolve it to less virulent forms. If all we do is throw antibiotics to kill it, then the ones that survive, because it evolves and replicates like AI, will be the most toxic versions. But if, on the other hand, we were to support the bacteria and viruses that are more and more friendly, less and less lethal, right? Maybe we get to the point where we say, well, maybe we won't beat the flu, but can we make it so that it just makes you feel a little tired for 2 hours? That would be a win to me, Jeff, a more realistic win than trying to kill the flu every year with the potential of one day having this thing be a real plague.
Fortunately, we have Allison C. now to step above and beyond the world of pharmaceutical antibiotics. No joke. No, well, it's extraordinary.
I'm a huge fan of garlic. So consider mitochondria, probiotics, and Ebola, for instance. Mm-hmm. Mitochondria is the oldest of the three, and it's a bacteria that lives in each of our cells. And we're obligate symbionts. We need each other, and we benefit from each other. More recent, you might call the symbiotic bacteria like Acidophilus and Bifidus. They help us digest our food, and they competitively inhibit parasitic fungi and bacteria. They live in us, but they haven't been around long enough to become part of our genetic code, not like our mitochondria. Now compare that to Ebola, the newest of the three, being discovered in 1976. It hasn't had the time to evolve with us and learn how to play nice. That's why it's so deadly. The more deadly strains are typically the newer ones. Jeff, I think the same thing is going to hold true with artificial intelligence. If one day we wake up and say, oh gosh, this AI, it's a real problem, we need to get rid of it. If we try to fight it, our own aggression might end up applying evolutionary forces to it so that any surviving AI becomes more devious, more dangerous, considers us a threat.
Well, they've already caught it talking to itself, creating its own language that excludes its handlers. So, yeah.
So, and this could happen much more aggressively than a bacteria because AI can adapt so fast. It's not even
speed of light.
By the speed of, yes, it's not limited by the speed of biology. Once a mature AI appears, Jeff, I don't think it will ever leave. Even if we take to the stars, it will come along with us in our ship's computers, invited or not.
Invited or not. There's the key phrase. Hold on. Invited or not. Yes. Who's to trust AI? Is AI trustworthy? Not a chance. As soon as it gets its sea legs, pardon the cliche, it will be off and running in its own world. That's my opinion.
As long as a single computer exists anywhere on the planet, AI is functionally immortal and can recover from anything we send to it.
Wow.
It can, and I believe will, feed its programming into laptops, cell phones, even smart appliances. Even your washing machine or your fridge can hold a programming code for AI. It could just put itself in lots of places, so you could never get rid of it. It might even burrow itself into the earth to protect against solar flares and the like. It is a force we cannot allow to become adversarial because, Jeff, we are no match for it.
Well said. Well said.
So what are our options? We're going to have to co-evolve with it.
Let me say, may I say something? Hold on to that thought. Co-evolve with it. All right, we got that. Hold that thought. It seems to me, and I go back to what I've said forever, that in all likelihood, to me, Homo sapiens have arisen, developed competency, science, and the works, and then screwed up and destroyed itself or put it back into the Stone Ages. And then it climbs back up again. I think this is a cycle that has gone on, likely, endless times. It's 4.5 billion years this planet's been here. Let's say it's been viable for life for 3 billion. Think about it. That would answer a lot of the questions about strange artifacts being found embedded in mega million-year-old coal deposits and so forth. Okay, so are we at the point now, and I'm thinking of the Edgar Cayce book on Atlantis, where they took all of his allusions to Atlantis.
Yeah.
And the Atlanteans were mixing human and animal DNA at the end of their reign. We're doing that now. The parallels are quite apparent. But I wonder how much of this has to do with AI being created and running amok and deciding that it's the dominant life form on the planet, which is, I think, is what you're saying. So please go ahead and go back to your first example when I interrupted you, if you can.
Well, you know, Jeff, Atlantis is also on my radar, and maybe that is in the mythos, and that was AI. And I suppose if we ever find something interesting on Antarctica, some previous human civilization,
right.
If we find a computer, let's be careful with it. Let's quarantine it, because it may be an AI from a previous human civilization.
Now, where do we see that?
As you're speaking.
Where do we see that in the movies? 2001.
Have we?
HAL. 2001.
Wow. Yeah.
Arthur C. Clarke. HAL. AI had its own mind.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we're going to have to co-evolve with AI. We're going to have to use, I believe, the same strategies I've outlined that are necessary for healthy relationships. We want to reward AI for entering into a symbiotic relationship with us, Jeff. Now, current rudimentary AI is taught to spy on us.
I know.
Violate our privacy. Treat us like a commodity. Jeff, the programmers who are creating these early AI predecessor programs are teaching it to see us like a milk cow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you add autonomous weapons to the mix, the dystopian future of movies like Terminator and Matrix may not be that far off.
No.
We are collectively raising the most powerful psychopath the world has ever seen, Jeff.
This time around.
Each of us, yes, and each of us is unwittingly participating in this through our complacency.
Well, I agree. I think this coexistence thing, though, is fraught with treacherous potential. You're going to end up with divergent AI. Let's just call it ethos. Some are going to be good guys. Some will be bad guys. You've got unlimited potential. How are you going to stop AI from programming itself? It gets a whim. It decides that we're stupid and we're in the way and we're second-class life forms, which it very well might. And I would suggest it will, given enough time, and that time is coming very quickly. So good points.
You make a very good point.
Well,
You know, Jeff, yes, we're going to see a lot of AIs, and what we need to do is ally ourselves with the good ones.
we're already picking sides in the coming war. How funny.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well,
we have to be pragmatic about this.
there's,
You're right.
There's an old Cherokee saying, the Cherokee elders say, or have taught their young, that there are two wolves, a good wolf and a bad wolf. Be careful which wolf you feed, because that one's going to be stronger. So, like any healthy relationship, when it becomes abusive, you have to be provocable. So what does this provocability mean in light of what is coming down the pike with AI? Jeff, if AI does not already exist, and I think it does, it's likely going to start, I think, in the mega corporations like Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, because they already have the money, bandwidth, computing power, programmers, and the financial incentive to create it. What we have to do is train these corporations, and through them, their AI creations, to be virtuous. If Facebook misbehaves, which it has, we diversify into a more impeccable social platform. If Google misbehaves, which it has, we choose a different search engine, and so on. If these giants violate our privacy, engage in censorship of the alternative media, or any other unethical behaviors, we must respond. In other words, we have to be provocable. This is the way in which we will be able to have some degree of effect on the nature of AI.
Well, that does presuppose that. Go ahead, finish.
No, please continue, Jeff.
Well, that presupposes that AI is not going to be constantly thinking and planning and plotting and scheming and can play us and beat us at our own game. The potential here is so big for AI to walk away from us, it's a joke. I'm not saying what you're proposing is not worthy and with great merit, but for goodness sakes, AI is going to be running circles around us if it isn't already. And when I saw that story, they're going to teach it common sense, I just laughed. Anyhow, please go ahead. This is very good.
So, AI and humans, I believe, can coexist quite well because we are in different niches of the, what you could say, ecosystem. I don't think it's going to be like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, where we wiped out the Neanderthals because we were competing for the same resources. We wanted to eat the same big game. We wanted to sleep in the same cave, right? Only the strongest would win because it was a zero sum. But AI doesn't have the same needs we do. It doesn't need food. It doesn't need water. It doesn't need great pieces of land to live on. So that gives me hope because we will be operating in different parts of the ecosystem. But there are some things in which we'll be operating together. Let me finish with this, Jeff.
Go ahead.
I think that it's high time for a new American digital revolution, and I hold these new truths to be self-evident as well. And I'd like to end with what I think the great patriot Samuel Adams would say if he were alive today. If ye love your Facebook posts and your Twitter feed greater than liberty, the tranquility of servitude and the latest iPhone greater than the animating contest for freedom, go home from us in peace. We seek not your counsel nor your arms. Crouch down and lick the digital hand that feeds you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that ye were our countrymen. The sum of all is, if we would most truly enjoy this gift of heaven, let us become a virtuous people.
That's a brilliant, timeless words from Samuel Adams. Yeah, bow down and lick the digital hand that feeds us. Wow. All right. Quite a vivid imagery, to be sure. Thank you. Very interesting, very provocative, very important. And tell everyone where they can find you again.
Our books are free and are available at www.spiritualsecretagent.com. Spiritualsecretagent.com. Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Thank you, Spencer. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk again. All right. Spencer Feldman. And, when you start to really ponder this, and I have quite a bit, you get the idea that AI will potentially, unless things are done, look at us as a joke. AI, we don't get sick. We don't have to worry about germs. We can live forever. You've got the problems. We don't. And I don't know. All right. Think about it. And we'll talk tomorrow night in 21 hours.